Kristen Gilbert's origins were as unremarkable as anything else on the surface of her life. She was born Kristen Heather Strickland on November 13, 1967, in Fall River, Massachusetts, and raised in a nuclear family of a working dad and homemaker mother in a well-to-do Massachusetts suburb. A gifted student, Gilbert was a member of the math club and ultimately studied her way into nursing. But at the same time, Gilbert was something of an oddball. Friends and former boyfriends recalled her as manipulative. She reportedly lied a lot as well. While in college at Bridgewater State College in 1984, a young Gilbert suffered psychiatric episodes in which she made violent threats against herself and others. She once even left an ex-boyfriend a note in which she claimed to have eaten glass and lied about a suicide attempt. She went on to get her nursing degree at Greenfield Community College in 1988 when she married Glenn Gilbert and began working at Northampton's Veteran Affairs Medical Center. Her work at the Northampton VA Hospital was rewarding, challenging, and exciting. Her coworkers liked her, and she reportedly organized a yearly gift exchange for disadvantaged families. Meanwhile, she and her husband had 2 children, and Gilbert maintained a burgeoning social life. Her superiors at the hospital were pleased with her capability and her work. All should have been well, but this kind of life, perhaps, was not quite up to Gilbert's standards. After being assigned to the night shift, Gilbert began an extramarital affair with a hospital security guard, James G. Perot, an Army veteran of the Persian Gulf War. After a few weeks of just flirting back and forth, we were down at the VFW, and after the VFW closed, I walked her out to her vehicle and we had a kiss, said Perot. Their forbidden workplace romance blossomed amidst the drama of the hospital, which also often involved Gilbert. Perot had become aware of the pretty night nurse who was on duty for some of the hospital's most distressing events. Perhaps he had heard the rumor that Gilbert was on duty for so many deaths at the hospital that colleagues jokingly dubbed her the Angel of Death. The nickname became more and more prescient, as it was later estimated that she was on duty during half of her ward's 350 deaths in a 7-year span. The odds of that being an accident are 1 in 100 million. Kristen Gilbert may have feared that the illicit nature of her affair wouldn't be enough to keep their hearts beating for one another, and began to manufacture scenarios, possibly to impress Perot. Maybe, like Jane Toppin, she was aroused by watching life slip away as she administered epinephrine to healthy hearts, essentially adrenaline, exciting the hearts to pump out of control. Maybe she just basked in the attention of swooping in and restoring life. Regardless of Gilbert's intent, her crimes were clear. Gilbert's presence around death in the hospital didn't let up. In late July 1995, 66-year-old Stanley J. Jagodowski was admitted to the hospital for postoperative bowel obstructions. He required only oral medication, but a nurse reported seeing Gilbert enter his room with a syringe. The nurse allegedly heard the patient cry in pain just before Gilbert exited his room. He died of cardiac arrest later that night. But no one could believe that the smart, controlled, and pretty, young nurse could be capable of murder. Even when a delusional war veteran refused treatment in her ward because of the rumor that people are dying around here for no reason. The patients are talking about it. The staff is talking about it. The staff is talking to the patients about it. Gilbert went unsuspected. The man was, after all, unwell. He was later injected and killed by Kristen Gilbert, his attending nurse. Allegations of abuse when she was a home health aide, violent threats, and a pattern of manipulation all swirled around Kristen Gilbert's blonde head as the investigations into the deaths of the veterans began. Nurses filed a formal inquiry in February 1996 based on their suspicions of Gilbert's involvement in the deaths of 2 patients. By then, Gilbert had quit her job and was institutionalized for a suicide attempt. From the psychiatric ward, she called Perot and declared to him, "I did it. I did it. You wanted to know? I killed all those guys by injection." Perot went to the authorities, and in a frenzied response, Gilbert called in a bomb threat at the hospital. Of the myriad patients she injected, Gilbert was found to have successfully murdered 4 former soldiers: Henry Houdin, Kenneth Cutting, Edward Squira, and Stanley Jagodowski with epinephrine, though prosecutors suspect there were many more murders that went undetected. Whether to try and save them or simply to watch them die, Gilbert injected them with enough adrenaline for their hearts to race past the breaking point. She was also accused of trying to kill 3 others. Gilbert, the prosecution would later assert, had done this to show off to Perot. He was called in the case of an emergency situation, and as her patients struggled for life after her injections, Gilbert would play footsie with Perot as the patient lay in cardiac arrest. She was ultimately convicted on March 14, 2001, of the first-degree murder in the deaths of 3 veterans. She also was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of another veteran. She narrowly escaped the death penalty by lethal injection, which would have been an ironic end to the nurse who murdered via syringe. Instead, Kristen Gilbert received 4 consecutive life sentences, and the Angel of Death spends the rest of her days behind bars in Texas.